My name is Callista. I'm 31 years old, living in Seattle and working in the software engineering field. I'm not wealthy, but I work hard. For 5 years, I saved every penny, from skipping fancy lunches to turning down dates, just to plan a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Europe for my parents and myself. But that morning, as I pulled up in front of the house, my mom came out with a suitcase, and my sister Harper followed behind her, beaming. I hadn't even asked what was going on when my mom delivered the sentence that shattered me. "You're not going anymore. Harper needs this vacation more." What would you do if your own family pushed you aside from the very life you worked so hard to build? Leave a comment, hit like if you've ever felt overlooked, and don't forget to subscribe so you can hear the full story. Because what I did next, they'll never forget. I don't remember how I even drove to the airport. All I recall is how tightly I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, while my mind went blank as if someone had just shoved me off a cliff. My mom sat in the passenger seat, pointing excitedly at different European landmarks she wanted to visit, as if nothing unusual had just happened. Harper, in the back seat, gushed about a TikTok she saw featuring a famous bakery in Paris. I bit my lip and said nothing. Every word out of their mouths felt like a knife twisting in my chest. With each passing mile on that highway, a bitter truth became more and more clear. They didn't see me. Not the me who planned every itinerary, chose every hotel, booked every dinner. I was just the driver. A walking wallet. A shadow forgotten amid their excitement for Harper. My dad sat in the back, turned toward the window. He'd always been like that, present but absent. Maybe deep down he knew this was wrong, but he never had the courage to speak up. I wasn't angry at him. Not really. Just quietly disappointed. Harper leaned forward, resting her hand on Mom's shoulder, her voice honey-sweet. "Mom, do you think we'll have time to swing by Amsterdam too? I saw this video online about a really cute old town area." My mom chuckled softly, her eyes gleaming like a burden had just lifted off her shoulders. "Of course, honey. Your sister planned a very flexible itinerary. Everything's taken care of. All you have to do is enjoy." I nearly laughed. Your sister. The way she said it, like I wasn't even sitting right there. Like I was a stranger who'd accidentally inserted herself into someone else's family story. I tightened my grip on the wheel, keeping the car steady in its lane. We got to the airport earlier than expected. I pulled into the international departures drop-off zone. The moment the car stopped, Harper flung the door open and stepped out with surprising lightness, like she wasn't the least bit conflicted about stepping into a dream that wasn't hers. Mom popped the trunk. I quietly got out to unload their luggage. Harper pulled her bright pink suitcase, then turned back to me, one hand on her hip and a smirk curling her lips. "Thanks, sis. Super generous of you. You should get some rest. You've been working so hard." I stared at her, saying nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because if I opened my mouth in that moment, I wasn't sure I could keep calm. Mom walked around the car and gently placed a hand on mine. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart. Next time we'll go, just the three of us. I promise." I wanted to ask, next time? When Harper gets dumped again? Or when she loses another job and needs a break? But I just nodded. I'd grown used to promises that never became reality. Dad came around and set down the last suitcase. He didn't look at me. He just muttered, "Thanks for driving us all the way here." That thank you felt as empty as the early morning terminal. Harper hugged Mom, then waved at me. "Bye, sis. I'll take lots of pictures for you." I stood there watching them roll their suitcases into the security line, as excited as kids heading off for summer camp. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just hollow, a sharp coldness spreading from my chest to the tips of my fingers. When they disappeared past the gate, I stayed there a few more minutes. The morning breeze swept through, not quite cold enough to make me shiver, but enough to remind me I was standing in a space that didn't belong to me, not physically, not emotionally. I got back in the car and sat in silence, both hands still resting on the wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. I thought about all the times Harper had derailed plans I'd made. My birthday canceled last minute because Harper had cried all night. The day I got my master's degree, no one from the family came because Harper was going through something. I'd lived too long playing the part of the good daughter, the rational sister, the one who always stepped aside to make room for someone else's comfort. But today, as I turned the car around and drove away from the airport, I wasn't that person anymore. On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't think about Paris or the itinerary I'd spent years perfecting. I thought about one thing only. If they could remove me so easily from the life I'd built for all of us, then I could remove them just as easily from my plans. I got home at 7:40. Seattle was still foggy and quiet. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the city move like it always does. But inside me, there was a stillness I hadn't felt before. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the travel booking site. And I started typing. Not an email. I canceled every reservation, each hotel, every tour, every dinner at the upscale restaurants Harper said she couldn't wait to post about. I erased it all. And I didn't regret a thing. I sat in silence in my small apartment, the dim desk lamp casting a glow over the wooden table. My heart still felt heavy, but my fingers moved with certainty. I logged into every travel account I had created months ago, each carefully labeled with notes for every location. I clicked on the Paris itinerary. 2 luxury boutique rooms overlooking the Seine. I remembered every description, every review I'd read again and again during late nights after work. I hit cancel. Then Florence. The gourmet food tour and pasta making class I'd booked for my parents, because they loved Italian cuisine. Cancelled. Van Gogh Museum tickets. I thought my mom would really enjoy it. Cancelled. I didn't stop. I canceled every restaurant I had reserved. Deleted every confirmation code from my inbox, every e-ticket from my wallet app. But I left the return flights untouched. They'd still need a way home, and I wasn't cruel enough to leave my parents stranded in Europe. I just wasn't going to fund their fantasy trip without me. Refunds began flowing into my bank account. I didn't calculate it all, but I could see the balance growing with every confirmation email. I opened another tab, logged into the savings account I'd quietly built over the past year, meant for a small business I'd been dreaming of starting, a travel planning app for solo women travelers. I transferred every penny into that account. No hesitation. No second thoughts. When I finally shut the laptop, the apartment felt unusually quiet. I poured another glass of water, leaned against the windowsill, and watched the leaves tremble in the breeze. I didn't feel like I was reacting. I wasn't being left behind. I had chosen to walk away from a role that never truly belonged to me. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of the moment. My mom's name lit up the screen. The first text read, "Callista, the hotel says there's no reservation. Can you check for us?" I hadn't even processed it before the next message came in from Harper. "Sis, what's going on? I'm standing out here in the lobby. The hotel won't let us check in. Fix it now." I held the phone, staring at the message. My hand trembled slightly, not from anger but from a strange feeling stirring in my chest. A quiet blend of satisfaction and sadness. I didn't respond. The phone buzzed again. It was a call. I declined it. Then Harper called. Then Mom again. I switched the phone to silent mode and set it face down on the table. I leaned back into the sofa, pulled the blanket lightly over my legs, and closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Mom hugging Harper at the airport, her eyes lighting up as if she had just found new hope in her life. Me. I was on the sidelines, invisible as air. Now they were standing in a hotel lobby in a foreign country with no room, no tours, no dinner reservations. And the only person who could save them was me. I didn't feel joy thinking about that. What I felt was balance. The phone kept buzzing, but I didn't pick it up again. Sleep came quickly and heavily, as if my body had just let go of a weight it had carried for years. I fell asleep right there on the sofa to the sound of unanswered calls. When I woke up, it was nearly noon. I pulled the curtains aside and let the soft, crisp light pour into the room. I made myself a cup of coffee and opened the window to let in the breeze. Everything looked as peaceful as usual. But I was different. I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 11 messages. I skimmed through them. No one can check in yet. I'm starting to get worried. "Callista, what's going on? I can't believe you did this. You're so petty. Call us back. Please." I sat down, opened my laptop, and reviewed a few more cancellation emails that had come in overnight. One line caught my eye and made me pause. "Refund processed successfully. Funds returned to source." I smiled. I was no longer the one who made plans for others to enjoy in my place. And they They would now have to deal with the consequences of their own decisions. I wasn't there to fix it anymore. I wasn't there to clean up after them. I picked up my phone and typed into the search bar, freelance travel writing course. I kept my phone on silent all morning. Each soft vibration reminded me they were still somewhere in Europe, spiraling in the chaos they created, still expecting me, like always, to step in and clean up their mess. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. I was no longer the agreeable older sister who sacrifices quietly and never asks why. By noon, after wrapping up a few personal tasks, I turned my phone back on. The flood of messages returned immediately. Mom, Callista, I truly don't understand. Why would you do this? It's irresponsible and cruel. Harper, you're so low. You knew I couldn't afford this and you still did it. You should be ashamed. Dad, can you call us back? We need to talk. I read every line calmly. Not one of them asked how I felt. Not a single apology. No one paused to reflect on what they had done that pushed me to react this way. All they wanted was for me to go back to being the old Callista. The phone rang again. I answered. Her voice came through immediately, no greeting, no hesitation, just a wave of pent-up frustration. Callista, what were you thinking? The hotel says there's no booking, the restaurants have nothing, the whole itinerary is gone. Are you seriously going to let us wander around Paris like this? Is this your idea of a joke? I didn't respond right away. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the small yard where the breeze rustled the trees. Mom, I said slowly, this isn't a joke. This is a reaction. A reaction to what? You're punishing us over something so minor. I let out a dry laugh. Minor? You're calling removing me from the trip I spent 5 years planning a minor thing? We didn't remove you. We just thought Harper needed it more. She just got out of a relationship, she's falling apart. You're always strong. You can handle it. I don't recall signing a contract to be the emotional backbone of this entire family, I said, my voice steady. And if I'm strong, it's only because I've had to be. For too long. Mom went quiet for a few seconds, then continued, her voice lower but still tinged with reproach. You're still family. Families don't do this to each other. You don't abandon your own halfway through. I took a slow breath. Family? Thought so too, Mom. But were you thinking of me as family when you told Harper she could take my place without ever speaking to me? Were you thinking of me when you gave someone else the joy I worked years to create? There was silence on the other end. I could hear Mom breathing, sharp, conflicted, maybe a little angry, maybe unsure. You should know better, Callista. Don't blow this out of proportion. You're acting like a child. I remembered how many times she had used that phrase to silence me whenever I stood up to unfairness. You're acting like a child. Always a way to make me feel wrong simply because I felt hurt. I spoke slowly, clearly. Mom, I'm not a child. And I'm not someone who's going to stay quiet anymore. You made your choice. Now I've made mine. I'm not paying for someone else to live the life I was supposed to have. And I hung up. What I felt afterward wasn't triumph. It wasn't smugness. It was a deep, echoing silence. The kind of stillness that comes when you finally step out of a role that never fit. The phone kept buzzing. Harper sent a string of texts I didn't bother reading. But one final line popped up that made me pause. I hope you're happy seeing your own family sleep in a hotel hallway. You're selfish and spiteful. I looked at the message, exhaled slowly, then placed the phone face down again. I didn't feel spiteful. It just felt clear. I was the one making the decisions now. And I knew that would change everything, not just for them but for me. I sat in front of the bookshelf, my fingers brushing the worn brown leather cover of an old photo album tucked into the bottom corner. The cover had faded, scuffed in places I'd long stopped trying to repair. I couldn't remember the last time I opened it. Maybe years ago, when I still believed that if I tried hard enough, my family would finally see me. I placed it on the table and opened to the first page. A photo of me as a child, standing next to Harper in red Christmas dresses Mom had sewn. Harper cried because she didn't like the color, and I stood there silently, gripping the unopened gift box in my hands. Another picture. Me at 18, high school graduation. I smiled brightly, wearing my gown and holding my diploma. The seats behind me were empty. Mom said she couldn't make it because Harper had a sudden stomachache. Dad had to take her to the doctor. I walked home alone, placed the diploma on the kitchen counter and started doing the unwashed dishes. No one asked how the ceremony went. I flipped to a photo from my 25th birthday. Harper had just broken up with her boyfriend, so the whole family canceled the celebration. Mom texted, "Hope you don't mind postponing this year. Harper's really fragile right now." I replied, "It's okay, Mom. Hope she's all right." That night, I sat alone eating a small cake I bought myself, watching the candles melt down without blowing them out. My 30th birthday. I had just gotten promoted and planned a quiet dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant. I made the reservation over a month in advance. But that morning, Mom called, her voice rushed. "Harper just lost her job, she's panicking. Your dad and I have to go to her right away. Hope you understand." I understood. And like always, I canceled the reservation, stayed home, ate instant noodles, and spent the night texting Harper encouragement. I used to think that was love. That sacrificing yourself was natural when you cared deeply enough about someone. But now, sitting in this empty room with sunlight spilling through the window onto the photo in my hand, I realized that wasn't love. It was being disregarded. It was other people getting used to putting me last because they knew I wouldn't push back. I quietly pulled out my journal, opened to the first page, and wrote, "I'm no longer the third wheel in the story of my own life." I paused, staring at the words, my hand still slightly trembling. In that moment, I felt like I was touching the deepest part of myself, something I had buried and renamed with softer labels. Maturity, selflessness, understanding. I had spent most of my life playing the role of the supporter. I was proud of my academic achievements, proud of the job I had, proud of the things I'd built quietly. But every time I came home, all of that shrank under Harper's shadow. Harper wasn't a bad person. She had once been a fragile little girl. But the problem wasn't her vulnerability. The problem was how the whole family assumed I had to be strong to make up for it. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked calm, her eyes a bit tired from lack of sleep, but there was a new glint in her gaze. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. I picked up a small box and began collecting all the photos I no longer wanted to keep. Not to erase memories, but to put them where they belonged, the past. I wasn't going to keep living inside moments where I was overlooked, dismissed, replaced. I opened the window and took a deep breath. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine. I had thought about it for a long time before I finally hit book now. Not because I hesitated, but because it felt strange finally doing something entirely for myself. No one coming with me. No one for me to accommodate. No last-minute requests. A trip with no Harper, no Mom, no sympathetic glances or passive-aggressive reminders. Be understanding with your sister, okay? I chose Greece. Not because anyone had suggested it, but because I had always been drawn to the mythology I'd read as a kid, to the white rooftops of Santorini, to the sunlit alleyways of Athens scented with oregano. My flight landed in Athens on a crisp September morning. The sky was clear, the sunlight warm like a thin layer of honey over everything. I rolled my suitcase out of the airport. No one waiting for me, no name card, no guided itinerary. Just me and a list of things I had always wanted to do but never dared. I rented a small studio in Plaka, the colorful old quarter filled with music drifting from nearby cafes. The landlord was a middle-aged woman named Eleni, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes but a kind demeanor. When she learned I was traveling solo, she smiled and said, "Good. A woman should know how to travel alone. Especially a smart one." My first morning in Athens, I didn't go to the Acropolis like most tourists. I wandered down cobblestone alleys with no destination. I stopped at a little bakery on the corner, bought a spanakopita and a cup of strong black coffee. I sat on the terrace beside a pot of purple flowers and watched people pass, not feeling like I had to rush. That afternoon, I signed up for a cooking class hosted in a local chef's home. We made moussaka, tzatziki and dolmades. In a sunlit kitchen that opened to a garden, I stood among 5 strangers, my hands sticky with flour, laughing without restraint. A woman next to me, Nora, a widow from Ireland, turned and said, "You have the kind of eyes that are gentle but sad. But today you look like you're coming alive again." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and smiled. But her words stayed with me all evening. On the 3rd day, I took the ferry to Santorini. Deep blue sea stretched out on either side, sunlight dancing on the waves like shards of glass. I sat on the top deck, wind rushing through my hair, listening to an old Norah Jones playlist. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time: peace. Santorini was breathtaking. Winding hills led to whitewashed homes and terraces draped in bright red bougainvillea. I rented a small room with a balcony overlooking the ocean. There was a round wooden table and 2 chairs out front. I sat there every morning and every evening drinking tea and writing. Writing about things I had never admitted to myself. Writing about what it felt like to be seen as the strong one, about the times I wanted to scream but chose silence instead. One afternoon I brought my journal to the black sand beach. The sea breeze was salty and soft. I sat on the sand watching the sun sink slowly beyond the horizon and I wrote. They never chose me. But I chose myself. A little local boy ran past, splashing wet sand on my legs. His mother apologized in broken English and I just smiled and shook my head. I wasn't upset. I felt alive. 7 days passed with no schedule, no phone calls, no reminders of duty. I woke when I felt rested, ate when I was hungry, walked when I wanted to. I began to realize I had lived so many years like a shadow chasing expectations. On my last night in Santorini, I sat alone at a small tavern overlooking the bay. The woman who owned the place, hair tied high, walked over and said, "You're here by yourself but you don't seem lonely." I looked at her, smiled and replied, "That's because I'm with myself." And maybe I truly understood what that meant. I returned to Seattle on a quiet afternoon, after a long flight that didn't feel tiring. My body should have been weary but my mind felt light, like most of the weight I had carried for years had slipped off somewhere between Athens and Santorini. I didn't tell anyone I was back. I simply came home, unpacked my bags, did laundry that smelled of ocean wind, and the next morning I drove to my parents' house. On the drive I didn't play music. I wanted to hear the sound of the engine, the wind against the window, and the steady rhythm of my own breath. No more regret. No more fear. I just wanted to stand in front of them and face the truth I had avoided for too long. The car stopped in front of the house. The white gate was slightly open, with bougainvillea vines curling up the fence as if waiting for a season of peace. I stepped out, locked the door behind me, coffee in hand, and walked slowly toward the porch. Harper opened the door. Her blonde curls were still the same, but her eyes no longer had that usual gleam. She wore dusty jeans and an oversized t-shirt, clearly hadn't bothered with makeup. She froze when she saw me, then narrowed her eyes like she couldn't believe it. "Well, look who finally showed up," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Worst trip of my life, you know that? We had to sleep in some dumpy hostel, eat cold sandwiches every day, and scramble through train stations because we couldn't afford a rental car." I looked at her, calm. "I only canceled what I booked. If you wanted luxury, you should have paid for it." "You're selfish." "Petty," Harper snapped, arms crossed. "You knew I didn't have money. You knew I was falling apart. And you still did it." My tone remained even. "I did know. And you knew exactly how much time, effort, and money I put into that trip. But you still climbed into the car, pulled your suitcase into my seat, without a second thought." The door opened wider. My mom stepped out. She wore an old blue sweater, the same one I had bought her 3 years ago on my first business trip. Her eyes darkened when she saw me. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said. "I didn't think I'd come back either," I replied softly. "A lovely family vacation," she said with emphasis, "turned into a disaster because of your stubbornness. Harper's humiliated. Your father's ashamed. Me? I'm just disappointed." I looked her in the eyes, unflinching. Disappointed in what? That I didn't quietly step aside like always? That this time I didn't let it slide? "In how you forgot gratitude," she raised her voice. "You're where you are today because of us. We raised you. We sacrificed." I set my coffee down on the railing. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "You call that gratitude? You missed my graduation because Harper had a headache. I walked across that stage alone. You canceled my 30th birthday because Harper lost her job. And you call that sacrifice? Or have you just never actually chosen me?" She went quiet. Not a word of protest. "I don't owe anyone anything," I continued. "Least of all, I don't owe injustice." My father stepped out, quiet as always. He looked at me, his eyes avoiding mine. "Your mother didn't mean to hurt you. She worries too much about Harper." "And what about me?" I turned toward him. "Every time Mom chose Harper, you stayed silent. I grew up in a house where everything I achieved was undervalued, and every mistake Harper made was excused. I'm not bitter. But I can't keep pretending I'm fine. Harper stepped back inside, clearly out of words. My mom stood frozen, saying nothing more. My dad remained there, like a shadow, unsure whether to turn back or step forward. I picked up my coffee, turned toward the gate. Before walking away, I spoke without looking back. I didn't come here to fight. Just to make things clear. From now on, I'll live my own life. If anyone wants to walk with me, they'll have to do it on their own feet. There's no more room for anyone to take the place that was once stolen from me. No one called me back. No voices pleading. Just a heavy silence that felt like a late confession. I stepped through the gate that used to be home. But I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. On the contrary, I carried with me everything I had once lacked, and finally reclaimed. I returned to my little apartment after that meeting with a strange feeling. Not relief, not quite sadness. It felt more like a deep pause, where the noise of past years finally receded and made space for a single clear question in my mind. If I no longer had to live to please others, how would I live? I stepped into my workspace, looked at the laptop on my desk, and suddenly recalled all the nights I had sat there crafting itineraries down to the last meal, for others. I used to think it was passion. But it turned out to be my way of seeking validation. Now I was different. I didn't need anyone to choose me. I would choose myself. I powered up the laptop and created a new blog account. The tagline was simple: Callista. Lone, not lonely. Travel is how I found myself again. I began writing about my journey to Greece. Not polished, not scripted. Just the raw emotions of a 31-year-old woman learning how to put herself first. I wrote about that morning in Plaka, eating a warm spanakopita under the golden sun. About the cooking class where the Irish woman told me I looked like I was coming back to life. About the quiet moment writing in my journal on the beach in Santorini. I shared the painful flashbacks too: forgotten birthdays, awards buried in the bottom drawer, the look in my mother's eyes when she called me ungrateful. But I didn't write to blame. I wrote to understand myself more clearly. After the first 3 posts, I didn't think anyone would read them. But within a week, I got an email from a woman named Linda, 56, newly divorced after 30 years of marriage. "You gave me courage," she wrote. "I canceled a group tour with friends because I was too scared to travel alone. Now I'm going. Just me." I read her words again and again, my chest tightening. I replied immediately, thanking her and wishing her a peaceful journey. Then came a second email. The third. Then 10. Women of all ages from all over, Alaska, Texas, Massachusetts, told me about trips they'd postponed for their kids, for their husbands, because society told them women shouldn't travel alone. And now they were ready to begin. I realized I wasn't alone. And more than that, I could create something meaningful. One Saturday evening while I was steeping tea, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Hi Callista, this is Emily, marketing director at Wander North. I've been reading your blog. We're developing a travel program just for solo women and would love for you to collaborate." I froze. Wander North was one of the largest travel platforms for independent travelers in the US. I had once dreamed of working there but never imagined they'd reach out. I took a deep breath. "I'm honored," I said slowly. "But I want it to be more than just travel. I want it to be a journey of self-rediscovery, with respect, autonomy, and real choice." Emily laughed softly through the phone. "That's exactly why we called you." After that call, I took 2 weeks off. I walked into my office, the place I had worked for 6 years under fluorescent lights and spreadsheets, and handed in my resignation letter without hesitation. On my last day, my boss, a man 20 years older who barely acknowledged me outside of meetings, came over, shook my hand, and said, "I don't know what you're up to out there, but it sounds big. Good luck." I just smiled. He didn't need to know. I knew better than anyone. I was finally living my own life. I officially launched a small consulting company, Callista Journeys, offering custom travel planning for women taking their first solo trips. No cookie-cutter tours. No pressure. Just freedom, flexibility, and safety. I partnered with local women in different countries to build honest, meaningful experiences. My blog was shared so widely that a travel magazine invited me to write a regular column. I got asked to speak at my alma mater. People wanted to hear the story of how I went from being removed from my own trip to building my own path. I had never felt so strong. Not because I'd done something grand, but because I was finally being seen for the values I created, not for how well I served others, but for how truthfully I lived. About 3 weeks after I quit and launched the blog, my mom called on a quiet Monday evening. It was drizzling in Seattle. I was sitting by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, editing a new draft when the phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. I hesitated. Not because I was angry. Just because. I wasn't the same person who used to pick up every time they called. I let it ring to the end. Then slowly I called her back. Her voice came through softer than the last time I'd heard it. No scolding, no defensiveness, just a long sigh before her first words. Callista, I think I was wrong. Not just about the trip. About a lot of things. About how many times I left you out and never saw it. I leaned back against the chair, saying nothing yet. I never thought you needed me like that, she continued. You were always strong, always capable. I assumed you'd take care of yourself. Harper, she's more fragile. I thought she needed me more. You thought I didn't need anyone, I said quietly. And because of that, you forgot I'm your daughter too. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Mom spoke again. Harper sees it now too. She said she's been awful. That she got so used to being prioritized she forgot how to say thank you. She wants to apologize. I listened. My heart wasn't burning like it was in the beginning. I wasn't waiting for a perfect apology anymore. I just wanted real change. I know, she added, saying sorry isn't enough. But your dad and I want to see you. Not to argue. Just to listen. If you'll let us. I sat still. Every part of me knew that if I agreed, things would shift. But I wouldn't walk into that conversation like a child trying to please the adults. I'd walk in with clear boundaries. All right, I said. I'll come. But I have one condition. Name it, she replied instantly. From now on, no one speaks for me. No one decides for me. No one chooses for me. If we're really going to rebuild this, then this family has to learn how to let me be who I am, not just someone to guide or to mold. For the first time in years, I heard my mother respond with something so honest it nearly broke me. All right, sweetheart. We met on a Saturday afternoon at my parents' house. I brought nothing with me except a calm state of mind. The air was cool, early autumn winds rustling through golden leaves in the front yard. When I stepped through the gate, it was Harper who opened the door. She wore a gray sweater, her hair tied up, no makeup on. You're here, Harper said, holding my gaze for a moment before stepping aside to let me in. Can I speak first? I nodded. We sat in the living room, soft light spilling through the large windows. My dad sat across from me, fingers laced together, no longer avoiding the moment like he always had. My mom poured tea in silence. Harper spoke, her voice slightly trembling. I'm sorry, sis. Not just for the trip, but for getting so used to having things handed to me. Every time something went wrong, I cried, I got angry, and people rushed in. You always stepped back. I thought that was just the way it was. But I know now it wasn't right. I stayed quiet, watching Harper. She didn't look away. I wasn't ready to fully forgive her, but I could feel the sincerity in her voice. My mom added, I raised you both the way I thought was best. But I didn't realize I was creating unfairness. I assumed you didn't need to be prioritized. I was wrong. I set my teacup down and looked at all three of them. I don't hate anyone in this family, I said clearly. I'm just tired of always being the one who understands. Every time I get pushed aside, everyone expects me to accept it. But no one ever stops to ask if I'm okay. My dad gave a small nod. His voice was low and genuine. I'm sorry for staying silent all this time. Silence is a form of complicity. I understand that now. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt something had finally been said. At last. I stood up. I need time. But I'm not going to avoid this anymore. We can start over, if everyone truly changes. And if not, then at least we faced each other with honesty. No one said anything else. But in their eyes, I saw something I had never seen before: respect. Not pity. Not the patronizing gaze of someone who thinks they know better. But the look of people just beginning to see others as they are. One April morning, I opened the door to my small office in Portland. It had space for 3 desks, a tea corner, and a wall shelf full of old travel books. But for me, it wasn't just a workplace. It was a symbol of a choice I once thought I didn't have: the choice to live for myself. I set my bag down on the chair, turned on the computer, and brewed a cup of tea. The sun was just rising outside the window, casting a soft, warm glow through the white curtains. On the desk, next to my notebook for next month's planning, was an envelope I hadn't opened. I knew exactly who it was from. The recipient's name was handwritten in a slanted, familiar script: Harper. I placed the cup down and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 typed pages with a few handwritten notes scattered throughout. Harper apologized. It wasn't rushed, didn't blame circumstances, didn't lean on her personal wounds like before. She wrote about the time after the Europe trip, when she realized there was no one left to clean up her messes. She said it was the first time she had to face the consequences of her own selfishness. "I used to think you were strong enough not to need anyone," Harper wrote. "But I forgot that even strong people need to be heard, to be chosen, to be prioritized, just like anyone else." I read the whole letter. No anger, no relief. Just quiet. Like sitting beside a flowing stream, not needing to stop it but also not needing to chase it. I didn't reply right away. And maybe I never will. Not because I haven't forgiven her, but because I no longer feel the need to respond to everything right away. I've learned how to choose what to carry forward and what can be left alone without guilt. On my birthday, Mom sent me a group photo. A small backyard gathering with cake, balloons, and soft yellow lights strung over the grapevine. I saw Dad beaming and Mom holding a knife to cut the cake. Harper wasn't in the photo. The caption simply said, "Wishing you a beautiful birthday even if we're not together." I stared at the photo for a long while. My heart didn't ache. It simply acknowledged that, maybe for the first time, they had done something for me with no conditions attached. I lifted my eyes toward the window. On the desk, a plane ticket to Iceland sat quietly in an envelope bearing the airline's logo. I had booked that trip 3 weeks earlier, during a sleepless night after finishing a blog post about intentional solitude for middle-aged women. The piece had spread faster than I expected. A reader from Wisconsin had sent me a handwritten letter to thank me. She said she had just booked her first trip out of the country. "You reminded me I once had dreams," she wrote. "And maybe I still have time to live them." I folded the letter and placed it beside the ticket. I didn't need more proof. I knew what I was doing mattered. That afternoon I had lunch at a small street-side cafe. The owner, a Turkish woman, recognized me from a travel magazine interview last month. "You're Callista, right?" she smiled as she placed a salad on my table. "I read your piece about Santorini. It made me miss my home." I smiled and nodded. "Thank you. That's the place where I started over." "You're good at that," she said, then walked away. I watched her go, feeling something quiet and steady growing inside me. Not pride, but peace. I no longer needed to chase validation from my family or from society. No longer needed to be the good one by someone else's standards. I had learned to stand firmly in my own choices, whether or not anyone walked with me. That afternoon, back at the office, I opened my laptop and added a new line to this year's plan: organize the first travel program for women over 45 who have never traveled solo. I called it Choose Yourself Again. Because no one else can do that for them. Just like no one ever did it for me. And this time I won't be the one sacrificing. I'll be the one walking alongside, not leading them toward what I want, but being there as they head toward what they've always wanted. Because I know now, being chosen is nice. But learning to choose yourself, that's what makes life real. I know everyone will see my story differently. Some will say I was too harsh. Others will call it an awakening. But if you've ever stepped back so someone else could step forward, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep peace in a home where you no longer felt seen, you might understand why I chose this path. I'm not sharing this story for pity or praise. I'm sharing it because I believe that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't forgiveness. It's learning to love yourself first. Knowing when to say no. Knowing when to step out of roles you never truly chose. And what about you? Have you ever been pushed out of the life you built? Have you ever given up your seat so many times that you forgot you were allowed to sit too? Leave a comment below. I want to hear your story, your thoughts. Because somewhere out there, someone might need your voice to find their own. If you want to keep walking with me, hearing real stories about family, healing, and reclaiming self-worth, follow this channel. There's still so much more I want to share. Things that are quiet but powerful. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next story.